Welcome to Hope in the Morning, turning tragedies and tears into testimonies of hope.
For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Chances are, if you've been through suffering, this verse, Jeremiah 29:11, has been quoted to you. But when you're in a seemingly endless season of trials, when the ocean has a strong undertone, you just feel like you cannot catch a breath, that you're drowning. How do these truths become a reality to you? How do you cling to the hope that we have in Christ? And how do we trust that He will restore our hope when we feel like it's just trial after trial after trial? Today, I have Sue Shaw joining me, and she's going to talk with us a little bit about chronic illness that she has walked through for many years, and just how she has grown in her faith in that, but also the hope that the Lord has given her when it felt never ending. So Sue, thank you for being here today.
Of course.
And can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then a little bit about what you've walked through over the last 10 plus years?
Yep. Well, my name is Sue Shaw. I have been married now for 17 years. We have 5 wonderful boys. They range from 14 years old to 6 years old. At the time of walking through this, I had the first 4 boys. And yes, that's kind of where all this starts, is after my second was born. We just started noticing that I was having some increasing just problems with after pregnancy that you wouldn't expect to normally be there, and they were not going away. And so eventually we went to a doctor to go get them, like a GI doctor, to get things checked out. And at that point, he had diagnosed me with mild, I don't even know if he said it was ulcerative colitis at that point, but a mild form of that was kind of the diagnosis.
So something that you thought either could be cured or would go away on its own in time. Is that kind of what you initially thought?
Yes, because it was not presented as, at that point, it wasn't even life altering. It was just odd and inconvenient.
Okay.
There was, some things going on. But yes, and even the diagnosis when they did, the initial colonoscopy and all that, it was just a mild form of, digestive ulcerative colitis issues.
Yeah.
And so at that point, we just tried going all kind of the natural route. Like, we saw the doctor a couple times, but you read all these books and you get on the interwebs and, they all say all these natural, just eat well, cut out the dairy and the gluten, and then you can heal your body.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much what I had tried to do for many years.
So at what point did it take a turn from you realizing that something's really wrong here?
I think it actually turned fairly quickly. We were just so intent on that we could heal this. We could keep this under control. I would go into, I would have these really bad flares, they're called.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know really how to describe them, but I would essentially be in bed for sometimes 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you reach a delirium stage where, because of course we weren't going to the hospital at that point.
Yeah.
And I would just lose all sense of time, and just extreme pain, pain and abdominal pain.
Because you also weren't really eating or drinking.
Couldn't eat or drink anything. I would always lose a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of knew that things were bad then, but I also, every time I got pregnant, so at that point I'd only had the 2 kids, the 2 boys. And every time I got pregnant, with the 3rd and the 4th, your body, even when you get pregnant, your body's natural response is to lower the immune system, so it protects the fetus.
Okay.
So every time I got pregnant, I would actually feel a million times better because my immune response would be lowered. So I was telling my friend today, I always had great pregnancies, and that's probably why, is because I actually felt better during my pregnancy than I did, otherwise.
Yeah. So you said, did it get worse after your 4th child? Was it worse with each one?
Every time I had a baby, it would just come back right away, and it would almost immediately get worse. I was in and out of the hospitals, and we eventually did go see. We reached a point, I want to say it was after my 3rd, that maybe it was the 4th. I honestly don't exactly remember. Some of that is all a blur. Those years are very much a blur to a certain degree. But we did, and we went and saw a GI doctor that was actually recommended by one of my husband's really good friends, who's a cardiac surgeon. And he knew of actually, so happens it was Pete Seward's best friend, who was the GI doctor. And so we started seeing him, and and when we did that first colonoscopy, after, like, things were just, he's like, I can't believe you haven't seen anybody in years. And it was very drastic from what we were told years before that, and then where I was at that point.
So at that point, were they recommending that you just get on medication, or were they saying that you needed to have surgery, or what were their recommendations?
We tried just medication, which we willingly, I said, give me all the medication. So, I mean, we tried all sorts of things. I was even on, what do they call it? Like what you would be on if you have cancer, like chemo pills. Yes. Like that was part of it. There was like a certain ritual, the stuff I had to take every day. And then those were not effective. So then we started doing infusions, and I was getting infusions, and that's very much trial and error when you're dealing with infusions, like especially when it's an autoimmune thing. Some medications will work for some people and some they don't. And of course you need to give them time to see if they will work. So is ulcerative colitis, is that an autoimmune? It is.
Okay. Yes. I didn't know that.
Yes. Okay. And the interesting thing is they say, I believe with most autoimmune diseases, that if you either have it or you don't, like you have the genetic makeup for whatever it is.
You can't really help it.
You can't help it at all. But it may never be like, it never may present itself. Like, so you actually dormant, have it when it's like dormant, basically. And usually when they start to present, and in my case, I mean, I was 33, 32 when it started. And I had never had any problems before that. But they say usually there's some sort of event, a virus, an environmental effect, something that will activate it, will activate it. And the interesting thing is, with my second child, I had preeclampsia. It's the only time I ever had any type of issues, and it was later in the pregnancy, so it wasn't even a whole, but that is like the only thing that I can pinpoint that, like I had no problems, and then I did. And it just seems to make sense that, maybe that was like what was kind of the activator to this.
So you say you have 5 boys now, and you had 4 boys then. So at what point did you find that you were pregnant again?
With the 5th? Well, I had number 4 was born in, when was he born? 2015. And so in between him and Max, so there was 3 years, I had 3 pregnancies and miscarriages in between those years. But in 2017 is when I actually had my entire colon removed. So that was kind of to answer your earlier question. We had tried all these infusions, and we let them try, and this didn't work. So then we tried another, and that didn't work. We tried and tried. And I just remember it was right before Christmas in 2016. And I was so sick. And I just reached basically a breaking point, and I basically crawled into his office, and I was like, it's gotta go. You have to take it out. It needs to go, because I like any alternative to the way that life was much better. And so then they removed my colon in February of 2007. I mean, it happened very quickly. And it
was a very big surgery too. I remember that being a very big surgery.
It was very extensive. It was like 6.5 hours to do the whole surgery, and then recovery and all of that. But so in between 2017 and 2018 is when Max was born. So about a year and a half is when I had 3.
So when you had those 3 miscarriages, did you struggle at all with feeling like your body was betraying itself, or why would the Lord allow, like, I guess, did you feel like the Lord was giving you this blessing of a baby in the midst of this trial, just to take the baby away? And then, like, was that a struggle for you at all?
It was, especially at first, because like I said, I always had these great pregnancies. I always felt like $1,000,000, and I never had morning sickness and, all this. And I really thought I was done after 4, and I was content with that. I was fine. Like, there was just really not even a thought on my radar. And especially after just having surgery, and then probably about 5 or 6 months after that is when I got pregnant. And I remember calling my surgeon and was like, I'm pregnant. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And he was basically like, probably would prefer that you weren't, but you know,
Yeah.
what are you gonna,
Yeah.
you know, it's not impossible. It's not bad, you know? And, so, but I remember, I was like so excited. It was like, yes. And so I had my first ultrasound, and I remember that they said, well, there's like nothing there. Like they did the ultrasound and the sac was there, but there was no baby. Like that's how they described it. And that rocked my world. I think because I had such this, I didn't even recognize it as pride, but I think internally it was like, I've always done great with pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so to have that happen, it was very confusing. Like, why is this happening? And it did rock my world for a little bit. You know?
Did that kind of did the loss that you had, and I know you said you had 3 miscarriages.
Yes.
So once you had those miscarriages, did it kind of put a longing in your heart to have that 5th child? Like, did you kind of feel like, okay, now I feel like our family's supposed to have that 5th child? Okay.
It did. I don't even know if it was like I thought we were supposed to, but it almost didn't feel fair. It was like, you give me this hope, right? To go out. That's exactly.
To go out
that's
on
how
your
I felt
mothering
like
journey
that.
with a
To
loss.
go out with a loss. Like if it was given to me, like now, like it's not, and it wasn't like I strived for it. It wasn't like I felt like, okay, we have to have another one. But it felt very much almost like a betrayal to go out that way.
Well, like sorrow upon sorrow, when I would assume that your heart was kind of aching for some redemption in all this sorrow that you were going through. And, you know, not only were you suffering daily, you know, and that's one of the things that I think people don't understand with chronic illness is that it's not just a once in a while thing. It's all the time. And that's something that I think is important. I was actually going to show that. So Sue's story is in this book, Hope in the Mourning. And your story is actually the longest story in here.
But you know, editing was so hard.
But I think that is absolutely perfect, because that is how chronic illness is. It's unrelenting. It's something that, as a church, I think that we need to remember that people that have a chronic illness, like, we don't ever want to make you feel like a burden. It's not. We need to be there serving you as faithfully as you're suffering. And so when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about how she mothered with this ulcerative colitis, and kind of how the Lord worked through her after this illness.
Do you want to be equipped to help grieving people? To learn what to say and what not to say from people who've walked through various trials? Throughout the month of April, with your donation of any amount, we'd like to send you a free copy of Hope in the Mourning, a hope-filled guide through grief. Be encouraged by their stories and equipped to offer hope. Visit us today at hopeinthemorning.org. Hope in the Mourning is a listener-sponsored program that encourages the weary, equips those who walk beside them, and evangelizes the lost. If you want to partner with this ministry, visit hopeinthemorning.org. And may you be filled with hope as you continue this episode of Hope in the Mourning.
So when we left, we were talking about how Sue, in her battle with illness, which had been going on for years at this point, that she also lost 3 precious babies. And then you found out that you were pregnant with yet another baby, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, my 5th is Max, and it was pretty soon after the 3rd miscarriage. It was not very long, maybe, a month or 2 after that we found out that we were pregnant with Max. And I remember we were just, we weren't scared, but we were just very cautious we usually waited to tell people anyway, you know, past that 3-month mark that everyone says. But we were just very cautious with this because we just weren't sure. And so we waited, and everything stayed fine. And so we actually announced on Mother's Day that we were pregnant with our fifth, and we had done the DNA test. He's the
Okay, so
only
you already
one
knew
that
it was a boy?
so we already knew it was a boy. We
Okay.
wanted to know.
'Cause I'm sure after 4 boys, you're like, oh, you're a girl, you
I
want your
know.
girl, but you wanted
Everybody
a boy,
says
right?
that. I was, yes, for number
Yeah.
4 and 5, I prayed that they would be boys
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's like, that's what I knew. I don't want
Yeah.
to rock the boat, you know,
Yeah.
like
When
this
your
is
boys
good.
are so like such a little
So
tribe, which
they
is
are
their best friends.
And
yeah.
so yes, so I definitely wanted it to be a boy, and so we wanted to know, and so we waited. And our Mother's Day picture, you know, that you do when you're all dressed up,
Yeah.
and you know, and we were holding the picture, and we said, "Happy
Aw.
Mother's Day," you know, for me and my 5 sons, or something like
Aw.
that. Or what a blessing it is to be a mom to 5 sons. And
Yeah.
so that was how we announced it. And wouldn't you know, the very next day I landed in the hospital, and this was after my surgery, so I shouldn't, you know, be in the hospital. This
Yeah.
all should have, you know,
You thought
been
it'd all be
resolved,
remedied,
right?
yeah.
And it wasn't. And we knew even before that things, you know, were not as well as we thought they were going, much better than they were beforehand.
Yeah.
But, you know, things weren't perfect. But yeah, so that was kind of a shock, a shock to us that the very next day I landed in the hospital for close to a week.
Wow.
Just because of my illness, not
Yeah.
because of the pregnancy, but
So-
because of the illness.
So did you find that your mind kind of went toward fear with that baby, like thinking initially that you were just going to lose this baby too?
I knew I was going to lose this baby. I knew it. But I didn't. But in my heart, like, I knew it. And it really was, I remember thinking, like, this is where the rubber meets the road, because even with the third loss, which had been just the December before that, I remember going to my husband, and I told him, I was like, I am just so at peace. Like, I feel like the Lord has just sustained us, and he's held us, and he's made me just so confident in his plan.
Yeah.
That this is the plan, you know? So whatever has happened to me, whatever is happening now, this is the plan, and it always was the plan. And I can be confident in that. So
yeah.
I'm very settled, and I'm very peaceful. But I'm so peaceful that it almost feels like apathy.
Okay.
I remember telling him, and I knew it wasn't, but it's just, you know, they talk about the peace that passes all understanding.
Yeah.
And that's really what it was. It was just such a rest in that it almost seemed uncaring.
Yeah.
In my mind, that I was going through a miscarriage, you know?
Yeah.
So when all this happened with Max, and then I landed in the hospital, it very much was, this is where the rubber, you know, do you still believe that, that whatever happens is in the Lord's hands?
Yeah.
And in my mind, it was like, I'm going to lose this baby too. And I did go to, it's not fair. Like, why would we get this far? Why would we announce this? Why does this keep happening? This is not fair, especially with all the imaging they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, you're not even supposed to be in the room when they're doing x-rays when you're pregnant, you know? And I was having MRIs done. I had CT scans. They had done x-rays in the emergency room. I was on all sorts of morphine and, you know, the Dilaudid and all the medication in there. So I just knew, all things considered, that, you know, the Lord was going to take Max too.
Yeah. You know, and I think that I have realized, even in miscarriages, and even with my latest one, like, my go-to thought was like, okay, Lord, we have open hands and hopeful hearts.
Yes.
But then it was like, when there was no heartbeat, I realized that, like, my hands were not as open as I wanted them to be, and as I hoped that they were. And I think that the Lord, sometimes he knows what's best for us, you know, and the Lord, in his kindness, as you said, Max was perfectly healthy.
He was perfect.
And that's miraculous, medically miraculous.
I mean, but from everything they tell you, I mean, it really is, you know. And when we were in the hospital, I'm gonna tell his verse. I wanted to read his verse that I came up with him for him. But like, his heartbeat, they had him monitored. It was crazy, because they had me in the maternal ward because I was pregnant, whereas normally I would be in an opposite, you know, in like a different part of the hospital, but because of Max, so we had doctors in, we had maternal doctors in, we had the, you know, GI doctors all in, all that. So it was very much, there was a lot of people around, you know, all the time doing a lot of different things. And his heartbeat, like, never faltered, not one, like, it never dropped. It was just steady the entire time after all of this. And he was a full-term baby. He wasn't even, so the Lord had given me this verse, and I actually had a leather bracelet I have engraved with it on there. It's Isaiah 61, 2 and 3. It says, "And to provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord. for the display of his splendor.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really, after we found, even after I had Max, and of course now his older brothers think he's incredibly spoiled because, there's something special about him, but it's almost like he's such a gift. And even now I tell him, I'm like, you are special because God gave you to me. Like you were not supposed to be here in the world's terms. I'm like, you are a gift. And I hope that someday I can explain to him more what that means. But he really, it was like, and I'm not saying that my faith was perfect and that I trialed through all of this perfectly well with him, but it's almost like he is the blessing. Like he was the reward at the end of this, the reward that I don't deserve, that the Lord still said, here you go. Here is your blessing. Here is your, here. Yeah.
And one of those things too, even with the babies that you did lose, like in Psalm 139, it talks about how the Lord has numbered every one of our days. Mm-hmm. And every one of those children still mattered. They still count amongst your children. You're a mother of 8. You're not a mother of just 5. And the Lord allows us to have even those short lives that we can actually guide their testimonies. Mm-hmm. And we can say, you know what, that was a painful loss, and going through ulcerative colitis and having to mother all of those children, extremely painful and extremely debilitating at times.
It's all part of the bigger story. Yeah. All those little things.
And you see how God is faithful. Story. What were some of the things that people did to kind of tangibly show you God's faithfulness? And I know you have a story in here actually talking about how you said, see boys, God sees. And so what were ways that people served you that you would tell our listeners are great ways to serve people who maybe are more independent?
Yes.
I feel like I've known you now for, I think, 12 years.
It's a long time.
And you're very capable, independent person. Yes. And so with just a couple of minutes that we have left, what would you say are the best tips that you could give to people that are going to serve other people that are in kind of like the relenting storm, the unrelenting storm?
I think that that's one thing, even through the illness and all that the Lord showed me many, many things, but one thing that you alluded to was just the independence. And really that's just a form of pride. And I like being in control, and I'm not even a type A person. I'm a pretty relaxed mom. I think the people who know me would know that, but I like being the perception that like, I can handle all these balls and I can do all these things and keep them juggled in the air. And the Lord, through the illness, through needing to accept help, that was really something that was revealed to me, that like how prideful my heart really was in wanting to maintain that illusion that I could do everything. And I think that's common for moms in general. But I remember there were times like you did several times, just drop things off at the house, like no questions asked. I didn't know anybody was coming. I didn't know, but I remember there were groceries, there was bread, there was peanut butter, there were games, there were toys, there were just left on our doorstep. And it always seemed like on the days when I really just could not, like, how am I going to make dinner for these kids? The amount of times that people just showed up with food. Like I remember one time my friend texted me, I made all this extra food. I didn't realize how much it made. And they had a big family, but it made more than that. She's like, I'm just going to bring this over. And it was on like a day that I needed it, that I needed that help. And it was like the Lord always provided for those days when I was really weakest, just allowed people the know-how just to say, hey, I'm just doing this. I'm going to do this for you. Yeah. I know the reaction, and there's nothing wrong with it, saying, how can I help? Let me know if there's something I can do for you. And the majority of people, whether they think they're independent or not, they're not going to let you know if there's something you can do, because they don't want to inconvenience anybody else who also has lives and has a family and, things going on. So I think one of the impactful things to me, and it did not make me feel less than, it did not make me feel like that I couldn't handle things. It made me feel so incredibly like, wow, this person they just did this. And the Lord knew and impressed on their heart just to do this for me. And so I would say that's one of the biggest things, if you're feeling just the nudge or the urge to just do something, just do it, because you never know, maybe they're not chronically ill. Maybe they just are having a bad day. Yeah. And they could really use some of that extra cordon bleu you made,
Absolutely.
Like,
so has your health been doing better?
It's still 100% better. The short answer is yes. There are definitely things that, are not as well as we thought they would be. But I think that the Lord, I determined that that's just the thorn in the flesh that, Paul talks about, that this is just like my thorn per se, that is here with its lingering, issues that, come around every so often, and that it just keep me humble and keep me focused and dependent on the Lord. Know that I can't keep all my balls juggled in the air all the time.
And there, you and I were talking before about how there's a strength in being vulnerable with things, and especially within the church, when we can just say, hey, this is my burden. Can you help me bear it? Because, the Lord talks about how he will take our heavy burden and that his yoke is light and he will exchange it for us. And what a blessing that is. But sometimes the way that the Lord does that is through one another, and that's kind of, I think it's in John 13 when it talks about that they will know that we are his because of our love for one another. And that's what we want to show. Like, we want to be able to put off our busy life and get in the trenches with somebody else and say, you know what, you are important, and I'm going to show you the love of Jesus today. And so, Sue, thank you so much for joining us today and being willing to share your testimony of trial and loss. And we hope that you have been encouraged by this episode, and tune in for more stories of trials and tears turned into testimony.
Hope in the Mourning is a nonprofit ministry that seeks to encourage the hurting, equip those who walk beside them, and evangelize the lost with the hope of Jesus Christ. To partner with our ministry or to make a donation in your loved one's honor, please visit hopeinthemourning.org. Your donation helps keep these stories of hope on the air and helps tangibly meet the needs of the hurting.